Happy Ether Drift spoiler season, everybody, but that's not what you're here for. Not at all. You want to rate completely different cards that aren't part of a new set. We're going to do this for the 194th time. Let's go ahead and hit random and see what it is. It's Stormcrow, baby. It's the meme. Let's go. This is from Alliances originally. Which is your favorite Stormcrow art? Which of these could it possibly be? I like this one more. Stormcrow, in case you didn't know, is the best magic card. Or at least the best creature of all time. This is 2 mana, 1 and a blue for a 1/2 bird with flying. That's the card. It's the whole card. But I promise you that nothing can defeat the awesome power of Stormcrow. In case you're uninitiated, this used to be a meme back in the day. That's why I'm like so excited to hit this like random 2 mana 1/2 flyer. This, due to certain rules, was occasionally played in Standard if your deck didn't have like Force of Will in it. Most blue decks did. But in case it didn't, your deck would sometimes play Stormcrow from Alliances because you had to play at least 4 of a card from like every single set. It's the Homelands rule. And for whatever reason, people were not playing Force of Will. They were occasionally playing Stormcrow. And this led to a lot of confusion on the part of players who didn't know that was the rule. And they'd scratch their heads like, why is Stormcrow in so many like sideboards randomly, you know? Like, CGB has a story about having played Mesa Falcon in his sideboard of like a blue-white control deck way back in the day when he was like, who knows, at 7 years old? That guy seems like he's still like 12. Not in spirit, he just looks good, is what I'm trying to say. He hasn't aged like at all. But, you know, we used to play really bad cards, usually in our sideboards, because of that rule. But that's not the only reason Stormcrow has become a meme. It's really become more, it's bigger than itself at this point. But obviously the Stormcrow hype has died down a good bit in the last 15 years. I think most people who have learned to play Magic in the last 10 years have not encountered a Stormcrow meme, and I kind of envy you for that, honestly. Honestly, I was kind of sick at some point of everybody pretending this is the best creature they'd ever seen every time it pops up, you know, so let's give Stormcrow the... let's just give it the honorary 5. Can we do it? Can we do the meme one more time before it's all said and done and give Stormcrow the honorary 5? I'm going to do it. Let's move on to Ornithopter. Wow, I can't give this the honorary 5 now. But I think I'd rather fairly rate this. This was originally printed in Antiquities way back in the day, and it cost about $7 to grab from that set. The revised one is still like $1.35. That's a little surprising. Although this revised one does look clean. That's a clean looking magic card, boy. This costs 0 mana for a 0/2 flying artifact creature that's also a Thopter. 0 mana for a 0/2 flyer. The card's busted. The card is actually, look at this, World Champ Decks 2004. That's how busted Ornithopter is. This is Affinity's fault, by the way. The whole reason that was a thing is Affinity needed 0-cost creatures. And it had multiple of them, you know. At some point it had this, Midnight, Frogmite, and just, oh my god. Affinity was a ridiculous deck. It really is. But Affinity's not the only deck that's ever leveraged Ornithopter. I mean, there were decks back in the day, guys. I know some of you remember this. That would go like turn 1, Swamp, Ornithopter, Unholy Strength. Next turn, you're starting to swing, you know, on turn 2 with a 2-power flyer, and that's unheard of power. Unrivaled power. Did you know that you can block? With that combination, you can profitably now block their Hypnotic Spectre. Did you know that? Terror can't even kill the Ornithopter. This is back in the day tech. But it was tech that mattered. I promise you. But Ornithopter is still played in a number of commander decks because a 0-cost creature, especially a flyer, for whatever purposes you need it for, is still like kind of busted. They don't print that many 0-cost creatures. This, I think Midnight's the guy I'm thinking of, the 0 mana 3/1. And then the 0 mana 0/3 artifact creature from, God, I don't even remember. I think it was Visions. And there haven't been that many more 0-cost dudes than like those 3. Maybe a 4th. I think there's a guy in Alliances that's like a 0/6 or something artifact creature, and every time it blocks it loses a power or loses a toughness. So again, there's just not a thing you see every day, especially in the modern day. I feel like, you know, the first 10 years of Magic there were a few of these guys and then like, no more, ever. It's a little too busted. So I'm going to give Ornithopter a 6.4. And I'm serious. The card is still just integral to a lot of artifact decks and anything that's looking to get a lot of permanents out at the same time, you know, very quickly. Ornithopter's still there for you. You know, one of the original inventions, but still one of the most useful. Still one of the most useful. And moist useful. It is. But Wild Growth is up next. Oh my goodness, we got it. Okay, guys, the other day, I was just telling you this, like a few days ago. I started doing one of these videos and didn't realize I hadn't hit record. And we got Wild Growth. We got like 3 cards in, and the third card was Wild Growth, and I looked over and I realized I wasn't recording. And I got really sad, because I really like this card a lot. And I think it's actually one of the top like 200 Magic cards ever printed, maybe. It's very, very good. And I was a little sad that it was going to be forever until we hit Wild Growth again. But no, we just had to wait like 2 days. We hit Wild Growth again, dude. This is just a single mana, green mana, for an aura that enchants a land. Whenever enchanted land is tapped for mana, its controller adds an additional green. Busted. Absolutely sick. Better than Llanowar Elves in a lot of cases. Because Llanowar Elves can be killed by any number of, 1 mana removal spells all throughout Magic history, including up to now. So Llanowar Elves is a very fragile little guy, and the Elves subtype does help a good bit in increasing its value. And just the fact that it's, mana on turn 1 is the best thing about it, obviously. But I would argue that Wild Growth is better in most cases than a Llanowar Elves. Costs the same amount of mana, is a lot harder to remove, especially before your opponent can really do anything about it. Your opponent might have Lightning Bolt turn 1, but they might not have, they can't have Disenchant turn 1, is the point I'm trying to make. But apart from that, Llanowar Elves always has to wait before it can tap for mana, whereas on turn 2, you can drop, Wild Growth on a land, on an untapped land, and then tap it for mana. It's actually a lot better, too, when you get multiples in your hand than a Llanowar Elves. You get multiple Larrys in your hand, you drop one on turn 1, you drop another on turn 2, and you've actually kind of like kneecapped your mana doing that. You're supposed to have 3 mana for a 3-drop on turn 2. But you spend one of your mana playing another Llanowar Elf, right? And that one has Summoning Sickness now. Wild Growth's completely different. Wild Growth on turn 1, Wild Growth on turn 2, you still have a buttload of mana. So much mana. You still have 3 floating, technically. Or 3 available to you. There's 1's floating, and you have 2 up. So Wild Growth is crazy. It procs like Enchantress effects. I can't tell you how many cards I've drawn off of Verduran Enchantress and Argothian Enchantress and stuff like that because of Wild Growth. Just gross card. They'll never print it in Standard again for good reason. And look at this beautiful Mark Poole art. Among the best Mark Poole work in his entire body of work from early Magic cards. Just an absolutely gross card that I am about to give an 8.7 to. Because it's actually one of the better pieces of ramp in the history of Magic the Gathering. It really is. You get down to brass tacks. The card is phenomenal. So, yeah, 8.7, and I mean it. I do. Ramp's good. Wild Growth is good. Proccing Enchantress effects for a single green mana is good. Paying for itself. The card basically pays for itself. If you have an untapped land, that's crazy. Just really nasty card it is. Fungus Sliver is up next from Time Spiral, a cool sliver. This is 4 mana, 3 and a green, for a 2/2 Fungus Sliver. You see, its name is also its creature type. All slivers have, whenever this creature is dealt damage, put a +1/+1 counter on it. Nice. If you can block profitably or attack in profitably and they take their blocks and survive or whatever. If you can somehow deal damage to them yourselves or, doing like enrage tricks or something like that, like maybe. Altogether neat sliver ability, but slightly overpriced for what it actually is. But they knew it was a more impactful line of text than you usually get on slivers, you know what I mean? So, pretty cool dude. And I'm going to give him, by the way, he's Fungus Elemental, which was never great. But I guess you can do the same tricks with Fungus Elemental, or with this, that you could do with Fungus Elemental. Back in the day, the big combo, if you want to call it that, was a Fungus Elemental and a Prodigal Sorcerer. Prodigal Sorcerer taps to deal damage to any target. Fungus Elemental is a 2/2 with this line of text, so if it just takes 1 damage, it gets a +1/+1 counter, right? So it just grows every turn thanks to Prodigal Sorcerer. It's neat. Combos are fun, but they're not good anymore. I like to reminisce a little bit. That said, I'm just going to give Fungus Sliver like a 4.2. It's a D sliver, but there are better slivers for sure. Revoke Existence is up next from Scars of Mirrodin, and this is 2 mana, 1 and a white for a sorcery. Exile an artifact or an enchantment. Clean. Sorcery speed kind of sucks, but exile helps to make up for it. It's not the worst card ever. Not the worst card in existence. I'll give it like a 3.9. Something like that. Solid-ish removal spell. Skull Fracture. Only ever printed in Odyssey with Paolo Parente. Always good to see Paolo Parente, man. A single black mana for a sorcery. Target player discards a card from his or her hand, but this also has flashback for 3 and a black. So even though it costs a total of 5 mana, it is a mind rot. This is 1 card out of your hand to deal with 2 cards from their hand. Like a Ruthless Negotiation. This is like a take on Ruthless Negotiation. But Ruthless Negotiation is better than this, and the flashback costs more, but it draws you a card. It exiles the cards, right? Like, I think that's just a strictly upgraded version of Skull Fracture, but still, Skull Fracture ain't half bad. Discard needs cards that have an early effect on the game like this, but also aren't strict one-for-ones, right? Like, not every card you play can be, I take a card out of my hand and you take a card out of your hand. That'll take you to, top deck war city, like, real fast, and you gotta outpace them in terms of card advantage at that point. That could be tough. So it's important to have cards that are effectively, 2-for-ones in your discard decks, and this is one of those. So not entirely terrible, and I like flashback as an ability as a general rule. So I'll give this a 4. It's right out of 4. I'm not going to talk it up too much, but it's okay. Cavalier of Dawn. We finally hit a Cavalier. I feel like we've never hit a Cavalier. This is printed in Core Set 2020. You can get a copy of it for $6.66 for $6.66. Weird. This is 5 mana, 2 and 3 red for a 4/6 Elemental Knight with Vigilance. When it ETBs, destroy up to 1 target non-land permanent. Its controller gets a 3/3 colorless column. When Cavalier of Dawn dies, return target artifact or enchantment from your graveyard to your hand. So 5 mana for a keyword ability and decent power toughness that just casts Generous Gift when it comes into play, which is pretty sick. And then when it dies, it gets you card advantage effectively. It picks a card out of your graveyard. So altogether, pretty good. Just a very solid, worth the 5 mana. You're never going to pay 5 mana for this and get nothing. Like, very often you're going to get to blow something up, almost no matter what. And then if they do spend a card getting rid of it, you get another card back. So very neat, very neat. As far as Cavaliers go, this is I can see why this is one of the more solid ones for Commander play specifically. I see people playing, Ashen Rider and stuff, like 7 and 8 mana guys that blow up a permanent when they come into play. I've seen more than one Meteor Golem in my time in an EDH rec deck list, right? So I imagine 5 mana for a similar effect, a Generous Gift on a huge body is probably pretty playable. So I'm going to give Cavalier of Dawn a 6.1. It's just an overall, generically strong card, and we like those a lot. Vaporkin is up next from Theros originally. This is 1 and a blue for a 2/1 elemental with flying that can only block creatures with flying. Cool Seb McKinnon art, but that's because Seb McKinnon does good art, like most of the time. All of the time. This is not great, though. I mean, there was a time in Magic history, I think, where a 2 mana 2/1 flyer is better stats than you necessarily expect. You know what I mean? Fine in draft in your Blue-White Skies deck, but not really too much to write your mother about. So or even your sister. You wouldn't write, sis, there's a 2 mana 2/1 flyer. It's not that important. So let's give this a 2.1. I think that's probably an appropriate score for it. Vindictive Mob from Ravnica City of Guilds is up next here. This is 6 mana, 4 and 2 black for a 5/5 human berserker. When it comes into play, sack a dude. Vindictive Mob cannot be blocked by Saprolinks. Thank God. Man, can you imagine if it could be blocked by Saprolinks? It'd be horrible. In draft, that probably mattered, but as it is, a 6 mana 5/5 with a downside, sack a creature is awful. Actively really, really terrible. So I'm going to give this a 1.11. Just kind of move on, sidle on here past it to the last card of the day, which is Tower of Fortunes from Mirrodin. Cool card, 4 mana for an artifact. You can pay 8 and tap it to draw 4. I think we've actually done this card before, so that means I can re-roll consequence-free here, but I actually do think it's pretty neat. I do think it's a neat card. Fragmento de Races is up next. This is actually a sliver, again. It's a root sliver. This is 4 mana, 3 and a green for a 2/2 sliver. It's exactly the PT and casting cost of Fungus Sliver. Interesting. It cannot be countered, and sliver spells cannot be countered. A lot better. This is better. In a lot of cases, it's just better. Always set it into play, and once it's set into play, then you can just play all the slivers you want to. Just probably a near must-play in a lot of slivers decks, especially considering it curves into Sliver Queen, so let's just go all day. Pretty good, man. All slivers are evaluated in the context of Sliver's decks. And with that in mind, I will give this a 5.5. I think that it's really playable and almost necessary at some tables to play this guy. That is all that we have for today. I will see you tomorrow. Hope these Ether Drift spoilers are good, man. In case they're not, you've always got random cards that were good. Come back and check the video out. Bye.